So exciting. All right. So everybody, we are here today with one of our listeners, Emma, who is a wildland firefighter. Is that the
This is
correct
so
term?
exciting.
I know. Okay.
This is the best thing when somebody sends an email after you're done with an episode. And there's always that sort of moment where you think, "Oh God, did we really screw it up?" But Emma was
Right.
like, "Listen, I know about being a lady firefighter. I know about smoke jumping. I know
Yes.
about family business in firefighting." And we were like, "Will you be a Firebird?" And then Jen made a joke to me. She was like, "Oh, 5-minute Firebird for
Five,
fire."
5 minute Firebird. It's like done.
I know.
I just got that.
All right. Well, welcome, Emma. So here's what we like. So start off by just telling us like about your job, like and
Yeah.
yeah, like tell us about what it means to be a wildland firefighter, I think especially.
Okay. Okay, so um my job up until most recently, so I'm a what's called a federal wildland firefighter. So in the US, I'm gonna play with my hair a little bit.
Me too.
Always.
When you when you're working on wildland fires, there's structure fire, which is handled by cities and counties.
Mhm.
And then there's wildland fire, and both agencies, and this is a whole other topic, are trying to figure out how to address like what's called the wildland urban interface, where
Right.
houses are in what were formerly woods, or like pretty much up against like grasslands or like
So
forest.
is this like when we see the pictures from LA of like whole
Right.
sides of the LA
Yeah.
County just like on fire?
Yeah,
There
so
is
like
a question as to who is in charge there.
yes, and in California, generally when that happens, if it is like county property, so we use what's called an incident command system, an ICS system. And the incident command system determines, and the dispatch centers work together to determine who has jurisdiction over this, what's called an emerging incident. And so, like when it's LA is a great example. When it's adjacent to Los Angeles, like it's most likely going to be on county land. And
Mhm.
then it becomes what's a CAL FIRE fire. And so a CAL FIRE incident management team takes over. And then they have like a kind of whoever is their incident commander, their IC, works with their staff to determine who they want to order and like what resources to order. And CAL FIRE actually has what's called run cards. So whenever I'm in California doing initial attack, which is when you're responding to emerging fires right away, they have what's called a run card, and they will just go down and order like a certain number of air tankers, what's called an air attack. An air attack supervises aerial resources, like the ground responses, which
Mhm.
will be like engines, hand crews. And it's
Right.
I'm trying to simplify it because it's pretty complex. But and then in wildland fire, we're a land management agency resource. So we come from Bureau of Land Management, Forest Service, and the Park Service primarily, Fish and Wildlife, and Bureau of Indian Reclamation, or BIA, Bureau of Indian Affairs. They also have their own wildland response forces, but the Forest Service and the BLM are the big players, and then the Park Service is slightly smaller, but also a big player, and then you have the state agencies. And
So
I've worked. Oh, go ahead.
no, I'm sorry. I have so many questions, but we're still just talking about your job. So you keep
Yeah.
going.
Oh no, it's a very complex system.
System. Yeah, it sounds really
Yeah.
interesting. Right.
It's multi-agency. They have their center is in Boise, Idaho, which is where I live. And that's called the National Interagency Fire Center. And the abbreviation is NIFC NIFC. And you can they're public agencies and they're governmental agencies. So you can Google nifc.gov and you can get access to pretty much all of this information explaining how all of these things are organized.
So
And
can we talk about how this came to be? Like, how did firefighting become a part of your life?
so I grew up, my my parents pretty much.
Yeah.
My dad was a firefighter. My mom was an engineer for the Forest Service. And when we actually I was born in Montana, and then we lived in northern Idaho, South Florida, and California before I finally like came back up to Idaho. And I've also lived in Montana for work and Oregon.
Mhm.
Um, but when I was in college, um, I needed a job in the summer,
Mhm.
and we lived in this really small town outside of Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Park, and the town was like 2,500 people approximately. So you could like work in the coffee shop, which was like, or the candy shop, or like they didn't even really have restaurants then. It's much more developed now with restaurants. Like, so there wasn't much to do, or you could work at the park. And my dad was what's called the fire management officer. So he ran the fire management programs for Sequoia Kings Canyon National Parks. And I was just like, well, I've always really liked dad's coworkers, and this way I'll get to stay in shape.
So there you go.
I'll get to be outside, and this way I'll get to stay in shape. And so I'll do that. And then I did, and I did that every summer through college. And then I graduated in 2009. So I graduated right like 6 months after the Great Recession started.
Yeah.
There really wasn't much to do. And so I was like, well, I'll just keep firefighting because I know that I can get a job. And so I worked at the park for a couple more years, and then I transitioned to what's called hot shotting. So I was on a few hot shot crews. I was on Sawtooth Hot Shots, Helena Hot Shots, and then, or Helena was last, and then Flathead. And then after 4 years of that,
Wait, so what is hot shotting? Is that a kind of firefighting?
Yes. Okay. So hot shotting. So
I'm sorry, I'm like, just tell me everything.
Oh, no. Hot shotting is, I wish I could I wish I had like the pictures. It was also before pictures. I have some pictures, but they're not like on your phone as easily as they used to be. Hot shotting there.
Well, Annabeth Albert has a whole series called the Hot Shots novels.
I can't even imagine what they're like.
I mean, I hate, like, I feel like before you go any further, like, I honestly feel like it's so hard to read books about like your job. And I can only imagine that that is more true if you are a firefighter as opposed to a teacher.
Oh my God, it must be impossible.
Be hilarious.
It's really
There's
hard.
also Bella Andre also has hot shots.
Yeah.
like it's so cringy. I'm just like, oh.
I'm sure.
Emma, be careful though, because the more you talk to us, the more likely you are to have an author reach out to you at some point and be like, Emma, will you tell me about firefighting?
I need to do some research.
Fine.
Yeah.
That's fine.
You're like, because it will help the books be better, right?
Yes. Yes. So hot shots, they're 20-person crews. They're a little larger now because they're trying to give people more time off for work-life balance, but you're considered an elite group of wildland firefighters. Okay. You are the workhorses of the wildland fire world, and to achieve they are what's called a type 1 crew. So you can be dispatched all over the country, sometimes all over the world, which is usually just like Australia or Canada so far. Like, we'll send what's called single resources, so single individuals to Greece and such, but or Spain to help, but that's pretty much it as of now. But hot shots, you have to have a certain number of quals within your overhead and a certain number of people. And if you go below that, you lose your type 1 status and become a type 2 hand crew. Because there's type 1 and type 2 of everything. Everything has a numerical order. Like fires are type 5 through type 1. The smallest fire is type 5.
So if you're a type 1 hotshot, does that mean like you are qualified to fight a type 1 fire? Or does that mean like you're the top guys? Or
it means that our crews are considered capable of doing type 1 work, so more complex assignments, more physically arduous assignments. Now, obviously, there's going to be variability. I think there are 140 crew type or hotshot crews now. California added 40 or 50 about 10 years ago. But no, anyone can respond to any fire. Like, the rating of your crew doesn't really correlate to what you respond to.
The fire,
unless you're in an overhead position, and then only a type 1 IC can manage a type 1 incident. Like I will be a trainee for a type 4 fire, so I can manage a type 4 incident. I am already qualified as a type 5 IC, so I can manage a type 5 incident.
Okay. And is it like moving up the ranks is like your experience, like how many fires you fought or how many, right?
It's a qualification system. So you have to take classes, and then this is a whole other topic. You have to take classes. It's very bureaucratic and similar to education in a lot of ways.
Sounds like it.
Yeah. Yeah. Like my friends who are teachers are like, oh yeah, this makes sense. So to do the type 4, to be a type 4 IC, I have to take a type 4 class, and I also have to become qualified in a certain range of qualifications to be eligible for that.
Mm.
And can take a really long time. It depends a lot on like where you are. I won't lie, being a woman makes it harder.
Yeah,
because you're
let's
just
talk
like,
about
So
that.
yeah, tell us about that.
not given. Yeah. Well, do you want me to finish my background first and then talk?
yeah.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Sorry.
Yes.
Oh, you're fine, you're fine, you're fine. So anyway, I hotshotted for 4 years, and then I became what's called a repeller, which is where I repel out of helicopters. This is my little sign for that.
Amazing.
Like,
A romance heroine.
It really, honestly, it's true. Yeah.
I did that for 5 years, and then I took a break and I worked in the National Interagency Coordination Center, which is the National Dispatch Center. And
That
I
feels
missed
like it would be less exciting than
it,
rappelling out of a helicopter into fire.
it is less exciting, but it does offer more stability.
I was going to say safer.
Safety.
Weirdly, I got injured dispatch.
Amazing.
Just hanging around in the office.
Like a file cabinet, we run into a file cabinet or something.
Yeah, I injured my sacroiliac joint sitting too much. So
That's amazing. See, that's not a Jen and I don't have that problem.
No.
So then I went back to rappelling. I did that for the last 2 years. And this last year I did what's called a detail. And the best way to explain that is like a school loaning you to another school force.
Yes.
So I went and I ran a hand crew for a year last year.
What's a hand crew? That's literally what it sounds like. Like,
yeah, you're on the ground, you're digging with tools, you're cutting trees down, you're on the ground, you're on the ground, you're delivered by vehicle.
Have you ever been a firefighter in like a town or like a city crew?
Oh no, I was gonna say I have been parts of fires that are up against towns. Like I had
right.
like buildings like in Missoula. There was in 2017, which kind of kicked off like California's like spate of really intense fire seasons. There was one outside this town called Grass Valley, Nevada City.
Yeah.
I've been on, but no, I've never been part of a city fire. I don't really want to.
It feels like very different. Yeah.
It would be not, and also like sort of not as exciting. Like this is a like big project works. This is a project work stuff, or not as exciting, but not as like project based. Like you really have to be strategic, it sounds like. And
yes, and that's my favorite part about it. It's like it's kind of, especially as you get higher and you get more decision space, you do have to be more strategic. Like it's kind of like playing chess. Like someone will ask you to do something and you're like, well, how many people do I have? What are they doing?
Yeah, right. What are the reasons? Yeah.
And then it feels also like very unpredictable in a lot of ways. Like is fire as unpredictable as it seems to those of us who don't know anything about it?
Yes and no.
Always.
Like, so we spend a lot of time, and there's a lot of research that goes into, like we classify fuel types, and like timber with like flash, like brush with like timber, like a grass component.
Right.
Like we spend a lot of time and we study the weather and we study topography, and like those are the classes. Like to even become a firefighter, you have to take these 2 classes called S130 and S190, and that's S130 is a basic leadership course and S190 is fire behavior. And that's weather and how fire works.
Yeah.
So like to some degree you can predict a lot. Like you can look at it and you can be like, okay, well, like this is what the RH, which is relative humidity, is predicted for the day. These are the winds predicted for the day. This is the temperature. This is how it was burning yesterday. It's going to be hotter and drier today. It's going to burn more intensely today. And you can use that to make decisions. But there's always like, especially with climate change.
Yeah.
So many trees have died from drought, or bugs haven't died during the winter, so they don't die, so they've killed more trees. So everything just kind of like, those bark pine beetles, everything like is pretty predictable, but also there's like this like hint of mystery.
Factors, yeah.
And also just like on a basic level, I think what fire like has a bit of an identity crisis, and it's because of our culture's identity crisis, which is that our culture still thinks of the land as something that we can control
Mm.
and that
Mhm.
we should control. Like we
Yeah.
still fundamentally don't understand that we're like a part of it. Like the
Yeah.
same calcium in that rock is the same calcium in your bone. And so there's this idea that like fire's bad and thus we should put it out. And in
Right.
reality, most of North America is extremely dependent on fire happening in certain ways at certain intervals for those entire ecosystems to function
Sure.
properly.
So
And oh, go ahead.
so my question is, I mean, I lived in California for a few years, so I'm like kind of
Yeah,
familiar with some of this like theory, but so
yeah.
like in at times of the year where it's not fire season, is that then like part of your job, like like controlling burns or like managing brush or like, you know what I mean? Like, so like there's
Yeah,
not fire season in the West 12 months out of the year, knock on
no.
wood, right? So what are you doing? So is that the kind of stuff that you do then in like the off fire months? I don't know how, like, how does that, like, you know what I mean? What are the seasons
Yeah,
of
certain
wildland
certain
firefighting?
people do. So there's your
Yeah.
temporary employees and you have your temporary seasonals and your temporary permanents. And they're generally to be a temp and to be a seasonal, you can't work more than 1,039 base hours because if you work 1,040, you're entitled to benefits.
Mm,
So there's like the seasonal employees, which who are usually brought on depending where they're fighting fire, whether that's the Southwest, like
mhm.
Arizona, New Mexico, that's March.
Yeah.
You're like Montana, you're probably going to be brought on in May,
Hmm.
and then work like through October, like Southwest, March, blah,
Yeah.
blah. Although some of those months, because of climate change and because of the fire seasons,
Mhm.
have been longer the last few years. Like when I was working at Nick, I was seeing Oregon crews brought on and being like going through their critical training and being like hotshot crews being ready to be dispatched nationally by like April 25th, which was
Wow.
a full
So
month to
early.
6 weeks ahead of time.
Yeah.
So those employees are usually laid off. And then you have, but there's like what's called the shoulder seasons, like spring and then fall. And you can do spring burning and fall burning. But then, like in spring burning, it's tricky because the snow might have melted and everything might be too wet to burn.
Right.
And then in fall, you're kind of like doing this dance of trying to get it before it rains, but it's also dry because it's been drying all summer. So sometimes, like air quality boards or people won't feel comfortable with you burning. Um, and then you have permanent employees, and they, if you're a permanent seasonal, you get furloughed, which is what usually happens to me. So I'll be
Mhm.
furloughed a few months of the year. And I can do trainings, or like a couple years ago, I got my EMT. So I was in my EMT class almost until November. Um, and then if you're a permanent employee working year round, you can do some burning, but this time of year is also just like the time where you take care of your auspice duties,
Yeah.
or you have all those user leaves that you have to use. So you use up your user leaves and take a bunch of time off. It's a pretty necessary lull. And there's a lot of
Yeah.
hiring that happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I have one more question, and then I'd like you to talk about maybe like books or things that you think get firefighting right and firefighting wrong. So, like last summer, obviously there were huge wildfires in Canada. I mean, like
Yeah.
just like, you know, and we in the States were like, what is going on up in Canada with these massive fires? So, like when something like that, like kind of the normal people pay attention, like how can, like what, I don't know, like what was going on, or like how can we understand or like be a part of like something positive to like, you know what I mean? It just feels like we're so distant. So like, but it,
Yeah.
as you said, it's such a big part of like the North American like landscape. I can only
Yeah.
imagine Australia, it's a huge deal, right? So like, why is it that we seem to be getting bigger stories about massive fires in places we've never heard of them before?
Partially because they are getting bigger.
Yeah.
They are getting bigger to, this is a complicated question.
Okay, I'm sorry.
It's a
Just
political,
make
no,
it
it's
as
fine.
simple as possible if it's like too much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a complicated thing.
Yeah.
Political as so many things are.
Yeah.
Um, so fires are getting bigger kind of through a confluence of climate change and like over 100 years of wildland fire suppression.
Yeah.
So in 1910, there Walker, Idaho, a town in northern Idaho, there were these big fires in northern Idaho and Montana, and all these acres burned and people died. and the Forest Service and Gifford Pinchot were asked to go look and see what happened. And when they did, and they like gave a report to Washington, D.C., they used a lot of, I hope I'm not like misquoting, and some fire scholar is going to see this and come after me.
If there's a fire scholar who is a Firebird on the Discord,
I think they're
don't
gonna
come
be
after
fine.
Emma. She's
As
really giving
a
us her
side note,
time.
this is the best public information officer assignment I've ever had.
We love it. You're like, I talked to a romance novel podcast and their listeners. We love it.
I've told so many of my friends.
Amazing.
But so he and his committee, they used a lot of really religious language, and they were like, fire is the work of Satan and blah, blah, blah. And people, it was big and it was scary, and they were Europeans and they're not used to seeing fire. And like Native Americans used fire really regularly. So like in California, since I grew up there, I wrote my thesis paper in college on subsistence practices of the Yokutt Indians and how they used fire. And they would burn spots of chaparral every spring because the deer and the rabbits would come eat the fresh buds, and then they would have food. And they like figured out over time, they're like, oh yeah, we also get tubers, we get flowers. And so most of North America relied on humans burning in conjunction with lightning fire. And so it became our ecological role. And then with European colonization, all of these Native American people, they couldn't, like, leaving aside the human tragedy of it, they weren't in those locations to fulfill their ecological role and keep burning. And then on top of that, they're gone. Like, so humans aren't doing what they're supposed to. New humans are in place, and they're putting out the fires that do manage to start. So it's kind of like this double whammy. So all of these forests that you see, and most forests that you see now, they're either very burned or they're overgrown. Very few actually look like they would have looked 150 years ago when they were having a normal, healthy fire cycle. And so you have climate change drying everything out, and then you have these overgrown forests, and it's kind of like turning into these big conflagrations. And then I think the media and new people report upon it because it's titillating and exciting.
Sexy.
Yeah, right, of course.
And also, and I think like on a more like human physiological level, I think it's scary to people, and people don't have as much exposure to fire. Like I was explaining it to someone. I went out with the military. I went out with the military a few years ago on the Dixie Fire, which is like the biggest fire California ever had. And I had my crew. And the first sergeant, she was asking me about it, and we were looking at this hillside, and I was like, this hillside is actually very unhealthy. It's green, but it's incredibly unhealthy. It was like, what we did is like, imagine if every time it rained for 100 years, we tried to put a huge umbrella over the ground. And we were like, we did it. We did a pretty good job, like scuttling around with our umbrellas and our tarps. But now, like, there's so much water in the atmosphere that every time it rains, it just dumps. And I was like, I don't think people, so there's that. And I don't think people have much exposure to fire in like a healthy sense. Like I'm around fire all the time. So flames are not a scary thing in my imagination. It's like, oh, like flames. But with the water analogy, when people think of water, they think of like their bathtub, their faucet, like a rain, the lakes, rivers. There's all these variations that they have to refer to. And when people think of fire, they think of like their campfire or like
something terrifying. Right. Absolutely. Like, right.
There's nothing for them to really refer to in their personal life. So I think it scares people. And so they put it on TV.
And to your point about politics of it all, like when we were growing up, right, Smokey Bear existed.
Right.
And then I can remember vividly, I lived in New England. Like we don't have fires. I mean, not like this. And I can remember like the commercial where like somebody would flick a cigarette out the window and then like it was like, and then California disappeared. And you're like, oh my God. Like a tiny thing can change everything. And so we just all became, I mean, I'm married to a Californian, and he is like obsessive about fire because the land is very dry, and also because he too grew up with Smokey Bear, the bear.
So I think they're big, and you hear them. I guess do you want me to answer your second part about what to do about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think people want to know if there is something we can do. I don't feel like,
honestly, like, I know people say this, but I think it comes back to it is calling your representatives, because a lot of the really restrictive fire policies come from public calling politicians. So
Okay.
like when you have your incident command system, you have your ICM top, and if it's on public land, if it's on a national forest, they have an agency administrator, which is
Mhm.
usually the forest chief ranger. The forest chief ranger, it gets political pressure from like the county commissioner or like from the local state representative, from the like maybe not the state legislature even, but like the actual House of Representatives. And they're getting pressure from their constituents calling that representative's office, telling them to put the fire out. So like, I think one of the biggest things you can do is go to like nifc.gov, the National Interagency Fire Center, and just click around and kind of familiarize yourself with how this whole organization and system works and that it even exists. And then read books about it. And then when there is a fire, resist the urge to call and complain about smoke.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Because what that does is it forces people to put them out and to prioritize that over everything else. And like, it forces people to choose the short-term strategy of minimizing wildland fire smoke over the long-term, like ecological and probably human benefit of
like a healthy forest.
And thus like a safer place for people to live. Like fire's not going anywhere. We're very small. Like firefighters, we're out there. We're in like plastic hats and like long sleeves and pants. Like a tree that's this big around will kill you. Like I've carried people off the line who've been hit by those trees.
Yeah.
Like we can do such big things, but also we're so small.
Yeah.
We're so small. Like we have no business trying to control everything.
Yeah. And
so that's my
I love that. It's such a like
all about the smoke.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's something really like relaxed and philosophical about that. Like,
yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
Call and say, hey, the smoke's fine. We're cool.
Yeah. Get yourself an air purifier, everybody. It's fine. Okay.
Everybody has masks at their house now. That's like a thing. So
it'll be off later.
So can you talk? So obviously this is a romance novel podcast. So, tell us a little. So obviously I saw your face when I was like, let's talk about these hotshot books. So I'm guessing you don't read a lot of firefighter romances. And is that because generally you can't suspend disbelief about how sexy people are in fire?
You're like, that's filthy and dirty. Yeah. Fair. Listen, fair.
I get it.
Also, like I think that's part of it. And there's like a lot of like idolatry to it, which makes me really uncomfortable. Like I feel really uncomfortable picturing my coworker being considered this like extraordinarily sexy hero. Especially when some of my coworkers are in reality kind of disappointing. Some of them are great.
I mean, you're rappelling out of a helicopter though, so that's some reacher shit.
I mean, that's like superhero stuff, Emma. Come on.
And many of my repeller brethren are great. But I think it's because like there's this whole series. I can't remember. My friend, I'm going to tell her. I'm supposed to call her after we get off. But my friend Rachel, she's a repeller with me. And she, a couple years ago, found these books. They're called like the Lake Chelan series.
I'm Googling.
Okay. Sarah's Google.
Yeah.
They're not, they're okay.
Listen, it's okay. Like no
shame. Romance novelist is like, I'm definitely going to get everything right.
Yeah. No romance novelist is like, my feelings are so hurt. Right.
You're too busy. You're
so
too busy.
Uncomfortable by the back cover and like by the cover that I couldn't actually really read it.
All right. These are by a person named Shirley Pennick. The Lake Chelan series.
Yeah. And I felt like it was like, they felt very hero worshipy. And so I get uncomfortable.
The first one of them is called Smokin' with an apostrophe.
Sorry, like I know that's wrong, but also it's romance
fucking perfect.
Amazing.
Exactly. That's exactly what that book is called.
I'm like, it's wrong, but
Smokin'.
So great.
I'm sorry. So please keep going.
I'm sorry. We're totally serious. This is a serious part of the podcast now. Yeah.
No, this is fine. This is great. I love listening to you guys giggle. Like I was laughing last night when you're talking about one night stands. I just like, I think it's the hero worshipy thing that makes me not read
I
too
mean,
much.
a lot of like cops and firefighters and military, like there's definitely
can I
like that's a
share that?
big part of like that genre, that subgenre is that these are heroes, right? And I think it
Yeah.
goes back to like I don't think people mean it to be necessarily like in a bad way, but like you're doing something that like you're so calm and casual about the fact that you jump out of helicopters and land in a fire. And you know, I just want to say that that is like truly heroic to me, right? I mean, but I also know that people say that I hang out with 13-year-olds all day, so it's fine.
I don't know if everybody could see this, but this is the cover
Sarah,
of Smokin'.
look at it. The heart is made out of a fire hose, and I'm
Oh
not mad
my
about
God.
it.
I love
I
how
haven't
Neil
seen it.
put your outfit and it's squirting.
Of
Look
course.
at their faces.
Listen.
They're very serious about this job. She's wearing a lot of white. It's not dirty at all.
No.
I noticed
She's
the
been
same thing.
photoshopped. Like in the real like version of this, she was like sitting on a couch holding a remote control. And they just
Yeah.
photoshopped her
it's her
into his
phone.
arms.
She's holding
Yeah,
her
I know.
phone.
We're going in.
Amazing.
Okay.
Amazing. Listen, romance is unmatched, everybody.
Yeah. But that's the main reason I haven't.
Yeah.
And also, I think I just haven't really tried to search it. I haven't really come
Yeah.
across like it's not like when I go to bookstores, I don't see a lot of books featuring
Wait,
that.
Yeah.
we didn't get to women.
Yeah,
One
I
of the
wanna
things
hear
you
this is
talked
what I wanna
about
hear
in
about, yeah.
your this is much more than a 5-minute Firebird, but
Sorry.
That's fine.
um
It's a
can
big
you
topic.
talk a little bit about being a woman in firefighting?
Yeah.
Is it as, I mean, the data, obviously, I have the data on Chicago and New York City, which is like not the same kind of firefighting that you're talking about, but I imagine it's not tremendously
I
different.
think you said 12% were in federal wildfire. And I was like, that seems about right.
Okay.
Really?
Yeah. If I'm on a crew and it's 10% women, I'm doing great.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But I mean, that's in a group of 20, that's 2 of you.
So you're
Yeah.
often the only
Right?
woman on the crew.
I'm actually usually not.
Oh, good.
Okay.
So try not to be.
Yeah.
If for no other reason, sometimes you need someone else who has a tampon.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Always.
Yeah.
there are some women are most like I will say if I go through the favorites on my phone, a lot of my best friends and my favorites are other female firefighters.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, I imagine it's a real, it's like, I mean, like any job that is intense and
yeah,
in many ways strange. And what I mean by that is like
Other people don't get
uncommon,
it. Yeah.
right? Most people do not understand the work that you do
yeah.
and
And
how you
then-
do it day to day. It makes sense that your friends would be
Yeah.
other people who
would
get
know,
it.
And then the women get it on a level beyond what even the men get
Sure.
because
Yeah.
the men, I'll hear some of my male coworkers say like, oh, this is like summer camp. I was like, this is not like summer camp for me. This is my job. Like
Yeah.
you are out here with like 10 of your besties. I'm out here with one of my besties.
Yeah.
And it's not that I'm not close and I'm not really good friends with some of the men that I've worked with over the years. It's there's like the sex thing that gets in the way, and I don't really know how to like say that more simply. Like a lot of men, ooh, this is about to get deep. We're about to get into like some gender theory.
I am here.
So our society is really bad at like male and female platonic relationships. Like it doesn't happen very often. So when you take a bunch of men and put them in a job and then you put a few women in the job, there is the aspect of like, oh, you're a woman in a man's job. And then like there'll be like subconscious resentments or conscious resentments saying that like you took someone else's spot or you don't deserve to be here as much. I've had someone very kindly explain to me over dinner why they would always be better at me than this job because they were stronger than I was and they were more rational and it wasn't my fault. The men and women are just like different. We just have different strengths.
More rational is my favorite part of that. Like,
Oh yeah, sure.
And
like men don't feel feelings at an 11 and
angry?
then blow things up.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And it's like, why are you angry? Like, I'm just explaining this to you. It's not a bad thing that you're worse at this than me. You have other strengths. This is like, these are all direct quotes.
Yeah, of course.
And
well, and if you're surrounded by other men who to tell you that, right? Of course, you're just like, no, I'm just saying the thing, right?
Well,
like,
and there's the misunderstanding that women don't get into the job because they can't, like, women don't I imagine many women choose not to join firefighting as a career because there are so few women
Right.
in
Yeah, and they
firefighting.
didn't know about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like I knew about it because my dad did it.
Your
Like
family.
Mhm.
Yeah.
if it wasn't through that exposure, I never would have thought of it.
Right.
Right.
Um,
You'd been working at the coffee shop, right?
I was not a very good barista. I had to do it 1 year after I hot shotted, and I was very crappy. I didn't like serving
Yeah.
people. I thought they were bossy.
Yeah. You were like, fire, yes, steam, no.
Yeah, I was coffee order like a paragraph long, like you're upset. Like we all did our best. No one's dying. You're fine. Um, but there's basically like a divide. It's harder to become as close with your male coworkers because
Yeah.
they like there's this element of like, what if they're worried that you'll be attracted to them subconsciously, or they're
Right.
worried that they'll be attracted to you. And like if they have a relationship, there's like this thing like I can't get too close to my female
Mhm.
coworker because I don't want to compromise my primary relationship. And then so you don't get invited to the things, like you don't get invited to go hunting.
Right.
You don't get invited to like unless there's a barbecue and everyone's going, you get kind of like subtly excluded from things.
Yeah.
And my female coworkers, they would get that. And so
Yeah.
we would spend time with each other. So like, yes, like me and my other guy crew members and my female crew member, we have this like greater bond of like all being on this hotshot crew together, like all being repellers together. And like the four of us repel these fires and we're like out there and we have to rely on each other. And like, you have to know, especially on repel fires, they're very remote. You have to know that whoever you're with will do everything they can in their power to get you off if one of you are
That's
injured.
wrong. Yeah.
And then beyond that, like one level up, there's the understanding you have with your female friends, like you know what it's like to be one of the only ones.
Yeah.
Right.
And that is
Wow.
like I that is like such a painful experience, and to have someone else understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I can only imagine. Yeah.
So
Yeah,
what would you say to somebody who is a young person who is maybe interested in becoming a wildland firefighter? How do they go about doing that?
Move to Idaho.
Yeah.
Well, you can't actually.
Somebody
Yes,
told me another
don't-
listener
vote
message.
crazies out of office.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Another listener messaged us on Instagram to say that she was from Oklahoma, and there's like some
Oh, yeah.
great program in Oklahoma for firefighters
Firefighting.
that people from all over the world go to.
Sweetwater, was that what it was called?
I can't
Sweetwater, something
remember.
like that. Okay.
All treks. So
Maybe.
there also are like
It's at a university, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's universities who are training people, and there's something called like all treks or
It's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a prescribed fire group and it's only for women. And
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and I've never been able to go to it, but like I would be happy to. USAjobs.gov is the official government website where you apply for stuff. Sorry, my roommate asked me a question. And that's how you apply for things, but they don't make it easy, honestly. More and more individual fire crews are using Instagram as an outreach tool and showing pictures of their crews and stuff and how to do things. So you can do that because they're having retention issues because we're not paid enough.
Yeah.
And we have to work a lot. And 2020, 2021 were insanely busy fire seasons and people were underpaid or have been underpaid for a long time. And that's a Congress issue. And so they were losing a lot of people and they're trying to figure out how to attract people to it. So like the Forest Service, the BLM, and the Park Service, they all have like careers, like about us pages.
Yeah.
Careers, and you can go through there and they'll give you links. And then you can look at individual forests. So, and this takes some legwork, like, okay, like where do I want to be? Like, where do I want to live? What are the public land entities where I want to be? Like, do I want to go to like near Portland? What is the forest near there? Oh, that's the Mount Hood. Like
Got it.
like Mount Hood district of I can't remember the forest off the top of my head. And then you kind of go through there and you can find numbers, and you can also look, if you find the names of crews, you can look them up on Instagram, and then
Oh, interesting.
And you
Okay.
can come like with no skill, like you get trained on the job. You get trained when you join.
yeah, depending on the type of crew, like I started on a type 2 fuels crew. Hotshot crews, they are taking first year firefighters because they're desperate for people, but preferably they like to have people with some experience.
Yeah.
Mhm.
My rappel crews, they really don't like to take first year firefighters.
No, I mean that makes
Sure.
sense.
I mean, that
That's
seems
a
Yeah.
scary job. You have
Yeah,
you
'cause,
can't
like-
lose your cool there.
No, you can't lose your cool, and there's just, I mean, rappelling's not always that scary, but you just, to go out and be managing a rappel fire, you have to be self-sustaining, and so you have to have a basic understanding of like how the organization that you're working within functions, so that you know who to call, and like you have to have an understanding of firefighting tactics and terminology, and when you're new, you just won't have that.
Don't have that. Yeah.
You'll just be like you'll just be like, it would be so mean to do to someone. You're like, here, good luck.
Yeah, right. Go do this thing. Right.
Just get on this helicopter. Don't worry about it.
It's gonna be fine. Just jump when they tell you.
Yeah.
Um,
And yeah.
So
Yeah.
Emma, before we wrap up, because you've been so interesting, it's been so fun,
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like okay, so you're not going to learn a lot of like real details about firefighting from romance, fine. Are there like books or nonfiction books, like what are the things that you know about where you're like, hey, if you want to know what this is really like here's something you could watch or read or whatever.
So there's a book called Young Men and Fire by Norman MacLean.
Yeah.
It's
Mhm.
about the Mansfield fire. Most TV is not very good. Like that movie about like Yarnell. Yarnell was this fatality fire where 19 firefighters died in 2013. The movie is like Miles Teller and Josh Brolin.
Yeah.
Not okay.
It's,
Yeah.
it's like
Sure.
anything. It's very sensationalized. Like it might be fun to watch, but like
Right.
don't expect it to be like that. Young Men on Fire, and then honestly, it's like there isn't much. I expect there to be more as it like raises in public consciousness,
Yeah.
but it's not a huge thing yet. And I read romance because I think it's fun, but I also read, for me, I use it as a good like counterbalance
Yeah.
to my job.
Sure.
Like around men all the time in a patriarchal hierarchical structure all the time. And sometimes the thing I want most at the end of the day is to sit down and read a book where a woman is okay and she gets what she wants and she's not ostracized and like sent packing like in a
Listen.
great tragedy for having sex.
Yeah.
Like that's like it's like therapeutic for my brain.
Yeah.
Same.
Sure. Same, right? What are some of your favorite romances then?
I love Jennifer. The first one I ever read before I knew it was a romance was Welcome to Temptation by Jennifer Cruzy.
Listen,
Classic.
that book is so good. That book,
It's so good.
yes, that book's
Do you
so
know how
good.
many times I've said to people, I've been like, well, you applaud it in the abstract, but resent it in the specific.
That book is awesome. I love that book. I
She's
really
so
do.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much almost everything by her I love.
Yeah.
I really like Tessa Dare. I like A Week to Be Wicked. I've realized I really like quippy, witty heroes.
Oh yeah,
Mhm.
sure.
So I'm a St. Vincent fan, and Lisa Kleypas.
Sure.
Like he's very witty.
That's
I'm
allowed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm a words person. I love that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it.
I loved Sophie's story. I think it's a Rogue of One's. That's your book, Sarah. It's the one with Sophie.
Oh,
from the-
mine.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. Oh, my book.
Yeah.
My Sophie.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
Rogue Not Taken.
Yes, Rogue Not Taken. I love that one. I love the one about Serafina.
Yeah.
I've
Jane the
like
Duchess.
I have a chronic pain condition. I've lost a bunch of people. So Serafina, like that, like grief
Yeah.
part of that book was like very real, like relatable. I loved Knockout. I
Oh,
liked
this is
so
nice.
good.
This is so nice. But
Yeah,
really, you
very
don't have
much.
to just name my book.
No, I'm looking at them. I'm like, there's a lot of them. I love Bet Me.
Ugh.
Yeah, these are classics. Like, I mean, these are books I've read and reread
Yeah.
so many times.
Yeah,
love it.
I have a lot of Lisa Kleypas.
Emma, if you're newer to us, we did do a deep dive on Bet Me in season 2. So you can go listen to it.
Really?
Yeah.
Go back, yeah.
And then for newer ones, let's see, I really like Helen Huang.
Sure.
Mhm.
The Kiss
I love-
Quotient, and yeah.
Yeah, I loved the Heart Principle. Newer books, and you guys have talked about this, they're harder for me to figure out because like the cutesy covers.
Yeah, right. And then you're like, what am I
It's
gonna
hard
get
to get a
inside?
handle
Yeah.
on what they are. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm gonna read like I don't know, like a PG, practically G-rated, like or if it's gonna be like
Or Tessa Bailey.
Or
Yeah.
Tessa Bailey, where you're like,
or
oh,
Tessa Bailey, where they're gonna be like deep emotions and fucking.
yes.
And that's usually what I want more.
Yeah, me too.
Exactly.
I
We
like
need
the-
like we need a brand, like a fire, like a
Yeah,
fire
a little
symbol.
fire. Like
Just a
we'll
little
just like walk around
flame.
bookstores and be like,
Oh yeah, little flames, like
Yeah.
yeah, I love all of those. I'm forgetting some.
Well,
Like,
this
I like
is
all
it.
the-
That's a good list. We
That's a
support
good
that
list.
list.
it is a good list. Well, maybe we'll put together a care package and send you some books.
To thank you
To thank
for
you
being
for being
here.
on. A
This was
magnificent
so
Firebird sticker.
great, Emma. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. And thanks
Yeah.
for all the work you do. Thanks for,
Yes.
taking care of the planet.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I was so excited. I screamed out loud in my car. When I got
Yay.
Amazing. Well, we're gonna put this on our Patreon, but then if it's okay with you, we might pull some clips and put like some of it on
Totally.
Instagram or like, you know what I mean, things like that. So because I think people are gonna really love watching this and like learning so much, and it was so fun and so interesting. So stay
Yeah.
safe.
Thank you. And I hope it gets some baby lady firefighters.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
What's your
right?
favorite trope in romance, Emma? Maybe we'll do an interstitial if we haven't done
Yeah.
it.
I know she's like
I
thinking.
feel like almost everything falls into this, but like I'm a sucker for forced proximity.
Mhm.
And I also, Sarah, you've talked about this. I love it when the hero has to beg.
I mean,
100%.
same.
I want them to
Always.
suffer.
I want you to have to suffer.
Yes.
Just suffer. That's the
Suffer.
title of the interstitial.
You know what? I'm gonna put it on the list, everybody.
Yeah, I love those.
Heroes who suffer.
Heroes who
That's
suffer.
it. That's the title.
Listen,
I
I'm
love it.
literally
I'm
writing
such a
down.
sucker for it. I'm like, yeah.
Listen, it's 2024. We're definitely going to get to a point this year where we want heroes who suffer as an
Yes, we will.
interstitial.
Yes.
Yes, we will. Yeah, we've got a lot.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much
Thanks
for
so much,
being with
Emma.
us. This was so fun.
Have a good
and
night.
It was nice meeting you guys.
I
Take
know. And if we
care.
get messages, we'll like send them your way.